Well, I think let's get going then. Um, yeah, because I know there's a bunch of people in here have already been playing around with stuff and kind of have a kind of a basic idea of what's going on. But I think maybe a good place to start is to just sort of chat about some of the basics of vibes and maybe you want to just kind of lead us in this, Brandon, and talk about well, like for me the kind of basics of what vibes is sort of always felt like this the provenance mining mechanic that's kind of pretty foundational seems like to me, and then obviously the vibes token as well, and just kind of the roles that they play in the ecosystem, and just kind of what your vision has been for those.
Yeah, totally. So I'll try to make this pretty quick, but if anyone does have questions, you can totally interrupt and we'll try to leave a ton of space at the end for questions, of course. But in general, Vibes is really first and foremost just a decentralized digital art collective. So that's very broad in general, and that's kind of the idea is that, like Polyforms was saying, the kind of foundational piece of tech for Vibes so far has been this provenance mining mechanic, which we'll elaborate on a little bit, but generally speaking, it's just a decentralized collective of artists, collectors, builders, anyone who wants to make stuff, experiment with NFTs and see where this kind of stuff can go. And kind of adopted a very experimental mindset around like doing this. So crypto is super exciting. It is a brand new type of technology. There's just completely mind blowing applications being built every day. And this is sort of just a way that I have decided to channel that energy for myself and other people interested in NFTs. So that's kind of the broad picture of what Vibes is as far as like the practical answer on that.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, so far, like my experience having been here for a little while is that yeah, kind of the gist of it has just been like a bunch of people who are making kind of really cool art and just kind of getting together to think about interesting ways to work with NFTs and add utility to NFTs and curation and all that sort of thing. Yeah, so this definitely feels like kind of quite a foundational part of it. It's just the community aspect of it as well.
Right, totally. And like with that rare about or that news about super rare kind of doubling down on decentralized curation. I spoke with just some of my friends before I even launched Vibes, really, about like just the notion of kind of moving away from either the centralized gate-kept platforms or just like kind of pure free-for-all, kind of like OpenSea, but maybe something in the middle where there's like this more peer-to-peer approach to curation. At the time when I had that conversation, it was just very abstract, but what's been very interesting over the last not even 2 weeks. It's only been 12 days since we basically started opening up Vibes to other artists. But over the last 12 days, something that's become pretty clear to me is that one of the most potentially most powerful things about Vibes is to serve as like a very interesting curation network of sorts that is based on the community, is based on a more peer-to-peer approach to how that works, and basically trying to remove the centralized notion of generally how you think about curating artwork and stuff like that. So that's another piece to me that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's all very cool. Do you want to maybe just talk a bit quickly about sort of the basics of provenance mining and how that sort of works in terms of just kind of releasing vibes tokens, and then a little bit about the vibes token itself as well?
Yeah, totally. So the Vibes token itself, starting at kind of the lowest level, is just like any other token that's out there. It's there was 1 billion with a B minted whenever the project started. Almost all of those first billion tokens are now locked in a safe, basically like a 3 of 5 requires signatures of a safe to keep it stowed away. Some of those vibes have been put into a system that we've been calling provenance mining. And so the general idea here is you can take a large chunk of vibes, you can infuse them into an NFT. You can think about this like sticking the tokens inside the NFT. And what happens is over time, the ability to claim those tokens within the NFT is sort of unlocked. So you can stick in as many tokens as you want, and every day 1,000 tokens become claimable from there. The idea with this really is you can think of it as each NFT sort of serving as like a time lock release mechanism that is releasing a fungible token over time. The tokens that are inside the NFT, they stay there if you trade the NFT, if you sell it, but the owner of the NFT at any time can claim them, permanently removing them from the NFT and kind of pulling it into their wallet instead. And so that's basically the low level mechanics, shoving tokens into NFTs, letting people trade and buy those, and allowing the owner to be able to pull out those tokens. So so far, the tokens that we've been infusing have come from what we call provenance mining grants. So with that initial billion tokens minted, a lot of them were just tucked away. And then some were explicitly allocated with community votes, basically, after from one of the first proposals. So 30 million vibes were set aside to basically give to artists to infuse into NFTs of their choosing, basically.
Cool. Yeah, and I think for me, just to like add to the provenance mining thing, what's I think is kind of interesting with that is that just as that as the sort of core mechanic, and then part of, and I know this is kind of part of what we've discussed in the past in the Discord group, is just like how that essentially just tokenizes the act of holding an NFT over time, because there's this kind of value accrual based on how much time a particular NFT has been held for. And I think recently, like some of the language that we've started using around this is not necessarily like how much vibes is locked in a piece, but how long vibes is locked in a piece. Like how much time of like 180 days of vibes or 270 days of vibes or whatever it is locked in the piece, which I think is kind of an interesting way of like, yeah, just giving sort of a time value to actually holding onto an NFT, which is kind of cool. And then there's potentially some interesting stuff that can happen with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, that's really in there. There's some pretty in-depth, like, heady kind of stuff that I wrote up at some point about all this. But, exactly what Polyform said is that it tokenizes the act of holding art over time. And it creates, I believe it is a true instrumentation of some notion of capital or value or whatever kind of philosophical term you want to use. Because if you're holding on to 120,000 vibes, the way to think about that is the only way really to get a hold of 120,000 vibes in any way that really makes sense is to just hold on to an NFT for 4 months, if I did that division right, or hold on to 4 NFTs for a month. It's basically sort of like a proof of holding, basically, if you want to think about it that way. And so it's in some ways too, it's a proof of holding, or really you could maybe call it like proof of participation in the network. So, the way the system is kind of intended to work is I like a lot of the art that the Vibes Network has curated because we have really awesome curators out there selecting cool stuff. So I go to Screensaver World or wherever, I start buying some of that art. Over time, I start building up my personal collection of Vibes NFTs. And after a while, they're mining enough for me to start claiming those and sort of inject it into my own art, basically by supporting other artists in the network, by being able to kind of select pieces and hold them and collect them over time. I possibly have the opportunity of being able to sort of participate in the network or begin curating myself, basically, as a way of opening that up.
I think that kind of segues pretty nicely into, so two pretty common questions that I've seen come up in the Discord is, what do vibes do, as in the vibes tokens, and what can I do with them, and how does infusion work, and how do I infuse my work? So like obviously we're at an early stage of that, but maybe you just want to quickly talk about that so people who aren't
Totally.
aware how that's working.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when we talk about like what's the utility of vibes and what are some things you can do with vibes, there's a lot of really dope ideas that we tend to throw out because there's just so much cool stuff that we've discussed and talked about that we can build stuff with. But over the last 12 days of watching the way that the curators have been using the platform, watching the way the community generally kind of interacts with this, and kind of watching the hype that's able to come from having this interesting curation layer built on top of Screensaver World. I would say the primary use case for Vibes is to allow an NFT to become a Vibes NFT. So one of the theories, at least, is that with this curation layer, with this social signaling that kind of comes along with, pulling an NFT into the Vibes network, that's a useful thing right there. And so the primary use case of the Vibes token is to do just that. So that's kind of the primary utility right there. Like that's what you can do with Vibes. As far as other stuff that we can do, we've talked about it being a governance token to be able to influence the way that a collective could buy and sell art, similar to Party Bid and things like that. A lot of other future features we can probably talk about a little bit later in the questions section if people want to know more about that. But at the simplest and lowest level, and like kind of currently functioning perspective right now, is that the role or in the use case of the Vibes token is to sort of elevate or push up an NFT into the Vibes network, basically.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, to like clarify for some people, is the way that that's working at the moment is like obviously what you've described there is the ultimate vision of where it'll get to. but things are still like super new. As you said, it's been like 12 days since sort of people have been able to start infusing things. But so like at the moment, there's not much that like the average Vibes holder can do with Vibes, because infusion is not available just kind of for everyone just yet. But I know obviously you're working on that, and you'll give us some updates about where that's going now. But so how it's worked so far for everyone is there's a select group of artists that have had the ability to infuse their work. And obviously, you've all probably seen some of those going around on Screensaver in these last couple of weeks. But the idea is to slowly open that up to more artists, so that ultimately anyone will be able to infuse their artwork with Vibes, just using kind of a UI on the website. Is that all correct, Brandon?
Yeah, no, that absolutely spot on. And so, and again, when I was kind of putting together some stats for the notes, I was kind of blown away that it was literally just 12 days ago that the system was even turned on at all for anyone but my art. So the first 30 pieces that were infused were just paintings that I made on Screensaver World. It was just all mine. And then after that, like Polyform said, it's now open to it's 10 selected artists and 7 are active right now, with an eighth probably becoming very active relatively shortly. But of those 7 artists, maybe kind of calling them curators, even more so is a little bit more accurate now. But their job has been to infuse other pieces of art that started just the same as I was doing it, where it was just infusing my own art frequently. But now what we're seeing is all sorts of cool stuff where those artists are choosing to infuse other people's art that they've collected as a way of signaling like, hey, this is a very cool piece. It's an artist I really like. I'm one of the curators on the Vibes platform, and I think that your piece should be in the network. I want to kind of pull it into the network, and so they've been given the ability to do that. So that's what's been happening the last 12 days. And something that will be switched on tonight is the ability for the curators, the ones that are selected right now, those 10 kind of original curators that we selected as the multi-sig in Vibes. They will have the ability to effectively allocate grant Vibes to other curators that they think would make a good fit for the network. So the first 10 was chosen by the Vibes multi-sig. And then those 10 now have the ability to choose any other people that they'd like to pull in as curators here shortly. And so it's a way of basically kind of decentralizing this stuff even more and empowering the people that we thought would be great sort of ambassadors to Vibes to continue that, continue that hype and find other people that they think would make a great fit to mentor other curators into the system and understand how that works. And just get more voices. Basically, they're able to do that. We originally selected people pretty intentionally that kind of grabbed a lot of crypto stuff, had a cool voice on Twitter, made a lot of dope art. But there's so many different kind of ways to think about who belongs in Vibes, and we don't want that power to sit with just one person or the 5-person multi-sig or even just the 10-person curation team that's there right now. So that's what we'll be launching later on tonight, depending on what time I get around to deploying that.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's a really exciting first step in kind of getting it available to more and more people. And I know you've mentioned at some point in various discussions, like how sort of obviously we started quite centralized, but kind of ultimately the goal is working towards a much more kind of decentralized model, which is cool. And obviously we'll just take a bit of time, but it's still super early. Did you have anything else that you want to add in terms of like new stuff that you've been working on that's kind of going to be coming up soon? Or obviously you're going to be deploying that tonight, giving the artists the ability or the curators the ability to do that. Is there anything else that's kind of in the works coming up soon?
I would say like with the recent change that like basically getting the multi-sig out of the way of infusions, which went up this morning, and then that kind of delegation process that we talked about. To me, that represents sort of the kind of completion of what is really the kernel of Vibes, which is how do you infuse things, like getting a site that's able to display this stuff, and then empowering curators to infuse themselves now without the multi-sig that's live now. And then the final step is, okay, great. How can we ensure that the system can kind of continue on? And so when I wrap that up and when that's deployed this evening, that to me represents sort of like a nice, clean sort of like wrapping up of a lot of stuff. So as far as what's next, that's fun because we're now at an inflection point, and there's a lot of these other ideas and sort of peripheral products and features that we've discussed and even just some crazier things too that, just all sorts of ideas. It's really wide open as far as what we build next. What I would really love to see is that now that sort of the core functionality, website, smart contracts, just kind of protocol thesis, now that the core pieces of those are all wrapped, I would love to see multiple parallel initiatives by people who are trying to build stuff to integrate more and more stuff here. So with the core stuff in place, I think we can, have a lot more experimental and crazy features sort of on the periphery that's leveraging some of the stuff in Vibes, using the tokens, maybe using some infusion stuff, all sorts of cool things we can build, and just kind of seeing where it goes next on that. So as far as what that looks like, that's kind of just up for discussion, and would love to hear people's ideas either here in the Discord or whatever people are thinking.
Awesome. And one thing I'll just say for myself and to everyone else who's here now and is maybe hanging out in the Discord is one thing that's been really great is Brandon is super open to feedback and ideas and thoughts from people. And I'm sure anyone who's been hanging out in the Discord already will know there's lots of just kind of discussion and thinking about things that could happen and ideas for things that could be implemented. So I think that's another really cool part of Vibes that I've enjoyed so far is just kind of building the protocol as a community and thinking about what is cool to do with it. So yeah, so definitely get involved in the Discord if you haven't already.
Totally. One thing I'll add in there too, as far as what's next, is that the kind of growth and acceleration of adoption and involvement has been pretty crazy, and I think that's really good and exciting. And so I do have some stats here that I was going to sort of read out just because they're pretty dope and actually pretty mind blowing to me. So it was basically 2.5 months ago was the very first NFT I ever minted on Screensaver. And then 12 days ago, there was basically 30 Vibes NFTs. And those 30 Vibes NFTs had 1 million vibes each. That was sort of the original set, basically. That was all just my art. And then in that 12 days, we went from 30 NFTs to 109 NFTs. So almost 80 new NFTs infused and brought into the Vibes network, starting from the original 30. We have 40 different holders of NFTs, so 40 different collectors are actually holding Vibes NFTs. There's 31 different artists featured across these NFTs. 7 curators, like I mentioned, are responsible for bringing those into the network, which is pretty awesome. On top of that, and speaking of what's next, we have that whole sequencer program, which is a whole another thing on that. There's been 205 sequencers minted across 64 different owners as well. So all sorts of cool kind of adoption, and there's plenty of interesting sort of network effects that we can start playing with that sort of distribution that's starting to get pretty interesting and pretty decentralized. So a lot of options as far as where we go, and a lot of very exciting sort of quick adoption and hype around the project as well, which has been great.
That's very cool. I was going to say, I know there's a protocol page on the website, but is there a page on the site that's got those stats, like how many collectors there are, how many pieces there are, etc.?
The protocol page has some of that. It doesn't show some of those breakdowns around the unique collectors and stuff like that, but that would be a pretty cool thing to add for sure.
Yeah, I think that'd be very cool to have on the website. So definitely, if anyone in the audience, if you haven't had a look around the website, go check out sickvibes.xyz, and you can look around on the protocol page. You can see info about the protocol and docs and all of that. It's definitely worth checking that out. So maybe I think it's time to open up for some questions, of which I'm sure there must be many. So I believe you should all be able to request to come up to speak if you want to ask a question. So who's going to be first? Unless there's no questions at all. It's just all been very clearly explained. Here we go. Welcome to the stage, Espinosa. You should be able to use your beautiful voice.
Hey there, y'all. How's it going?
Yeah, all good, man.
Right on, man. Thanks for having us here and opening up the space to answer some of these questions. The title of the room is very appropriate, at least for me. I've been seeing talk of Vibes around Twitter and Discord and the Screensaver Discord as well, and seeing some pieces that are infused with Vibes. And I was hoping y'all could maybe walk us through on what the process would be if someone wants to take their NFT that's minted on Polygon and and infuse it with vibes, and in which ways can we get involved with the protocol from a non-developer standpoint? Because I've tried wrapping my head around some of the documentation and what you have built, and it's all super intriguing and mysterious, and it's very attractive to me. But I must admit that I'm not understanding a whole lot.
Awesome. That's a really great question, and that's great to hear that there is intrigue and mystery. That's kind of definitely sort of the vibe a little bit. Is that's to me that's what crypto feels like. It is this wide open space. There's all sorts of crazy stuff. Like I literally understand maybe 5% ever of what's going on, and that's what makes it a lot of fun. So glad to hear that that's the case for you too. But very good question as far as like how to get involved. The best answer right now, and the most important one, and really what one of the aims of the protocol is support the artists that are releasing Vibes art. Buy it on Screensaver World. We're going to have even more artists coming in on top of the 31 that I said are already in there, because we're going to have more curators coming in. So that's the easiest and probably best way to do that, is just support artists by buying their work and starting to collect their stuff. As you are collecting their works, and the earlier you do that, you'll start earning those vibes basically, which the point of earning those vibes is not to make money. It's not an investment vehicle. It's nothing like that at all. But those vibes that you're earning are effectively your proof of participation, of saying that, hey, a couple months ago, I bought all these cool NFTs from these artists, and now I have that. Once you have those vibes, in the future, we're going to have the ability for people to, even if they're not a curator, potentially get around to being able to infuse their pieces. Now, another way you can do that is just make really cool stuff, and a curator could potentially pick up your piece and start infusing it. Now, as far as how that works, that's a very good question. I have some ideas on how we can coordinate that at a social layer. I don't think it would be good if we got into this kind of space where people are constantly bugging the curators, so to speak, to infuse their pieces. But I would love to find ways as a community to make it so that it feels accessible and that it feels fair for people to be able to share their art, and for our 7, and what is likely to grow to be far more than 7 curators, be able to pick out the pieces that they think are really sick to start infusing them. So short answer, best thing you can do right now is support artists by buying their art. If you want to be a vibes artist and have your art infused by a curator, just make really dope stuff, share it on Twitter. You can tag Sick Vibes. You can use the Sick Vibes NFT hashtag, I believe, too. Try to get some visibility on that, and just hang out in the Discord and kind of see what's going on there. And that's a good way to sort of get involved as well. So does that help clarify it, or is it still in the mysterious / intrigue column for you?
No, that really does clarify a whole lot. Really appreciate the answer. Thanks.
Yeah, totally. Awesome. Looking forward to seeing what kind of art you're doing over there too. So if you have any questions, definitely hit us up in the Discord about that stuff.
Yeah, just to add to what Brandon said, I think like definitely from my perspective as well, and like how I got involved is just kind of hanging out in the Discord, because it is like all the people that are in there are just doing some cool art. So just kind of hanging out in the Discord, keeping up with what's going on, and yeah, it's just a good way. That's kind of a good way to get involved, just kind of at a social level. Right, who's next? Who's got a question? You should be able to request to come up on the stage and be a speaker if you want to ask a question.
If one thing is people are thinking if they have some more questions, I did want to sort of address the kind of questions that were coming up. There's some really awesome discussions yesterday amongst everyone about like, should you LP? Why would you LP? What's the point of LPing? And also just sort of thinking about how to grapple with the notion of a market price of vibes and what exactly that means. And if you missed that, there was a lot of really dope back and forth, some really good conversations. Just check the general channel of Discord for sure. But the short version of this, as far as that I would say, is that the market serves a very specific and potentially important sort of part of the protocol, and that is to really sort of tether the Vibes token to something else in a way that allows it to be understood of maybe what its price is. Now, at some point, that may be a very useful thing to have. Right now, when the protocol is literally just getting kicked off the ground, when the final supply of how many vibes we're going to use is kind of unknown. And just all the sort of tokenomics are really, really quite in flux. The market price and even the role of the market and the liquidity pool is just going to be very small. It's a small piece of the overall puzzle. Vibes doesn't exist to make people money through vibes. It's not something like that. And so it will be a small piece of the picture right now. If you wanted to dive into experiments, to like, I personally like using that because it helped me kind of understand the way that the underlying token balances changes as a liquidity provider and all sorts of stuff like that. Feel free to do that. It's an interesting thing to play with, but it's not a place to dump a lot of money. It's not a place to invest in or anything like that. It's just a way of sort of playing around with some of these things that.
Oh, I think we lost you for a second there, Brandon. I know mine keeps telling me that I've got a slow connection or something, so I don't know if you've maybe just dropped out a bit. While we're waiting for Brandon to reconnect. Oh, maybe back.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
Cool. Nice.
So yeah. Basically, if anyone has any questions about that LP stuff, I'm not sure where I cut off there, but I'm happy to answer all that stuff.
Cool. Everybody seems to be pretty filled in. No questions. Rex and Max, don't know if you wanted to come up and as some of the other curators, if you had anything that you wanted to add about like your experience with being a Vibes curator has been like so far, and kind of listing your pieces, because I know you've both been fairly active doing some stuff. James, welcome back.
Hello. Okay, I'll kick it off then. I've got a question. I'm very interested in the semantics of. You use the phrase "infuse," which to me is sounds like making a really delicious elderflower and jasmine tea on a Saturday afternoon. Can you explain just like the provenance of why you're using the word "infusing" with vibes?
Yeah. One, excellent imagery. That's great. And I believe that so originally, and like if you look at the like the source code for the contracts, the expression was seed, like you're seeding it, like seeding a like that grows into a plant or a tree. I think I used the term inject too, was some of the language around that as well. And even initially too, when I was talking, I think I used it almost everywhere. I think it was Professor Rex that actually suggested going with infuse. I think she might have used it in a tweet of hers. And it just hit. It sounded cooler. It sounded a little less like mechanical and a little bit more like like I don't know, whatever that vignette you just described is, a little bit more like kind of like alchemy or something. Like there's some kind of magic that's happening basically. I think it also sort of conveys this notion of like a very kind of permanent coupling, like you're kind of like fusing these two things together. Because for one, the infused tokens inside of an NFT cannot be removed by anybody, not the multi-sig, not any way whatsoever, except through provenance mining. It's a permanent operation that can't be reversed. And once the tokens have been infused, the only way to get them out is just wait, basically, and claim them later. The second thing, too, is that it's possible to potentially work around this in the future, but the way that the contracts are set up is that when you infuse an NFT with vibes, that's the only time that can happen. You can't infuse it later with more vibes to top it off, even if you've already claimed and mined all the tokens out of that. So I think it's actually kind of interesting that you can only do that a single time. Once the token has been infused, it's in that vibes network indefinitely. It doesn't fall out of the network after it runs out of vibes. It's kind of forever marked as a vibes NFT. But it's sort of like the one moment that a curator can signal, hey, this is a cool piece of work, cool piece of art. And just like the provenance of holding an NFT over time, you can see who minted it. You can see what wallets it's been to, how long it's being held and transferred. The kind of act of curating a piece, the act of infusing a piece can only happen once. It's recorded on chain, and that the infuser or that curator is kind of forever and permanently associated with that NFT as well. So when you're looking at an NFT and when you're on the Sick Vibe site and you're looking at a token, you're always going to see three names. You're going to see the artist, which is immutable. It's only going to be the person that made the token. You'll see the collector, and that's just who's holding it right now. And there's that history of collectors in the past, which is kind of the cool provenance piece. And then the third name is going to be the curator. As soon as a piece is in the network, that curator is permanently attached to the NFT indefinitely. And to me, that's a very interesting kind of social thing there, is because if you think about it, you can look at collectors that you think are able to collect really cool stuff. You can look at artists that are able to make really cool stuff. And you can look at curators that have really great tastes, basically, that are curating things. And even as they kind of flow through secondary sales, you can always go back and understand who is the person responsible for making the decision to pull this NFT into the network. Does that help answer your question, James?
Yeah, that's a really coherent answer, very nuanced towards it. And I think like what I've seen over the last sort of 8 months or so is that we have to, as creators as well, be able to communicate that to other people. We have to spread like how this works, and I think like trying to visualize what this is and describing it as essentially a curatorship token. It's just as simple and cool as that. It's like, and it's not leaning on any financial incentives, but it's adding an extra dynamic. But the only follow-up question was, how does it work that you can infuse something after it's been minted? Because I thought it's something you do at the time, but it's just a different process.
Right. And I like that, like being a curatorial token of sorts. That's definitely how I see it on there. And that's why, the market conversation is tricky because, it's not a store of value exactly. It's, it's an instrumentation of something real, but how that relates to other assets is hard to say. So I really like the way you put that. But to answer your question, how can you do it after it's minted? Is that an NFT can be infused at any point after it's minted. In fact, it has to be minted first. And the only constraint that's kind of that's locked down and can't be tuned is that the curator must own the NFT at the time they decide to infuse that. So that's an intentional choice there too, of just kind of ensuring that it's like that provenance piece. A curator is really putting their signature or putting their mark on a token and saying and endorsing it and kind of pulling it into the Vibes network. And so that can happen at any point. It can only happen once, but it can happen at any point. So you could get a token, 6 months from now, and if it hasn't been infused before, you can decide to infuse that if you have the curatorial abilities at that point.
There's a question from the Discord. James, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
No, please.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, feel free to keep asking questions if you've got more stuff. There's just a question from Glooch, who can't type on Twitter for some reason. Just asking, will this only stay on Polygon? So I know, like Brandon, you've spoken about how it doesn't actually have to be a screensaver NFT. It can be any NFT on Polygon. But maybe you want to just speak to that a bit.
Yeah, totally. So like Polyform said, the way it's the contracts at least work right now is that any NFT across any platform, any smart contract on the Polygon network can be infused. And so I think it was the philosopher who was kind of bringing this up because he's got some pretty cool voxel trucks that he's been building on his CV plots, just like some dope stuff in the metaverse, which I know absolutely nothing about, but wearables and a lot of that stuff, and even parcels themselves are NFTs. It is right now you could infuse those NFTs with Vibes. You can infuse wearables with Vibes. You can infuse any NFT that's on Polygon with Vibes to do that, which is cool. But beyond that, it is, it's all these smart contracts were actually ported from my work on L1 with something that was just sort of called the BVAL NFT project that I started over there. Gas prices got crazy high. And so I moved over to Polygon to be able to experiment a lot better. So to answer your question, yes, we could any EVM compatible chain. So Polygon, Ethereum, obviously, a lot of the sort of roll up solutions and other kind of like proper L2s. Polygon, probably characterized more of a side chain. It's all possible to get that stuff going. As for when or why, totally just feeling that out basically. So lots of protocols have started to move into a more multi-chain perspective. A lot of the work that we do, over at Boardroom as well is kind of built with this multi-chain perspective as well, that's really the way we're going. And with all these proper L2s and rollups really starting to hit speed probably over the next like 3 to 6 months, especially, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot more interest in pushing Vibes out to multiple chains as well. What that looks like, we'll figure that out. But definitely something that I'm not ruling out, and definitely something I think would be really dope to see.
So there was a question from Lisa just on the Discord, just saying, in my experience so far, the thing that might be the most difficult about Vibes is knowing where to get started and what questions should I even ask. What are some ways you feel the community can use the community to effectively onboard themselves? Can polyforms / other people share their onboarding experience? Yeah, well, maybe I'll go quickly for that, and then maybe Max and Rex want to talk to that as well. I think, like, for my onboarding experience, I managed to get in relatively early, so everything was still quite new and kind of being developed, and there like wasn't a bunch of stuff on the Discord, so I was or in the docs even, so I was like able to kind of quite easily just read through all of that and figure out, just essentially for myself, figure out kind of what the deal was with that. But Max and Rex, I think you came in a little bit later. But for me, kind of what I've been doing with the people whose work I've been infusing is just kind of trying to explain to them a bit, as a curator, just kind of trying to explain to them a bit the basics of how the system sort of works. And I wrote a post on my site as well, kind of about the basics of vibes. Because I think for me, just sort of understanding the core mechanics of like the provenance mining and the vibes token is sort of a good place to start and get people kind of thinking about what the possibilities are and what they can do. But I think also some of the stuff that Brandon said about just it being this kind of curation layer and sort of trying to convey that to people, that it is about kind of curating art and creating this community of curation around the art. Rex and Max, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, polyforms, I am relatively newer to the Discord, and I kind of read the docs after Brandon sent them over, maybe a few weeks before the project launched. I will say for me, I've like mentioned it a few times, like I had experience with like another like chain and marketplace that had infusions built into their NFTs. It's called Ghost Market. The main reason why I don't still use that platform is just because it's a little bit harder to like onboard collectors and other folks to the marketplace to actually get the coins. But they had a cool setup, which was you could infuse an NFT with like their native token to like actually mint tokens. So I think it's called KCOW. You could infuse their token with like USDC. You can infuse it with other NFTs. So like the idea of wrapping or putting another token inside a token I had been exposed to, which kind of made sense. As far as curation, I kind of started off here like just like you with like my own art, but kind of quickly realized it could be a great way to give a second look to some pieces that I had collected on the platform earlier at a time in which I think a lot of things were kind of trading for really low, but I thought these pieces just deserved a second look. So I thought vibes would be a great way to sort of like jumpstart that second look. I've had a lot of personal things going on this week, so I haven't had a chance to fully like sit down with artists and explain the curatorial part of it. But for folks that I have been able to infuse some pieces for, I've kind of given the option. If I've collected from you before, I've tried to reach out to folks and let them know, hey, I've infused this piece, and then gone back and offered also the option to infuse another piece for them that I haven't collected and send it back to them so that they have the option to either hold it or sell it themselves straight up so that they can kind of get a taste for it. But I'm hoping that in the next few weeks I'll be able to actually like set up some time to like speak with artists so they can kind of get like the backbone of the project and like the kind of like the ethos of the project. So it's been very experimental for me. Sorry, I know this is pretty wordy, but yeah, it's still very experimental on my end.
Just to quickly hop in before Max, if you want to say something, is to just sort of piggyback on some of the stuff that Rex said. I think kind of a cool way of onboarding people, like Rex was talking about, is if you've got like, if I've bought someone's art on Screensaver that I like, and obviously I've bought it because I like that piece and I think they kind of have a cool vibe or whatever it is, and so I want to infuse that because I want it to be a part of the Vibes ecosystem. Kind of what I've been doing is reaching out to those people first and saying, hey, like there's this thing called Vibes. I really like your piece. This is kind of the deal. Are you happy with me infusing this, and it's kind of a cool way of just giving people a basic idea of what it looks like, because you can infuse the piece and then they can kind of go and see, and they can see the vibes ticker, and they can see the piece in the vibes site and see like, okay, it's got this much vibes in it, and it's kind of mining at this sort of rate. So I think interacting, and I think that'll be the job of the curators going forward, is those people that are going to be curated is just kind of communicating with them and saying, hey, I'm kind of curating your piece, and I think it's a really good fit for this kind of community. And just kind of slowly getting them into how it all works via one of their pieces. Max, do you want to jump in there and say anything?
Sorry, I'm at work pretending that this is a Zoom meeting, so I just got to listen.
Nice.
that's all good. Nice one.
That's awesome. I love what both of y'all were saying, Rex and Polyforms, on that, and even like that piece of like reaching out, or like, I have a ton of pieces on Screensaver World. Me, I just gotta scroll through, especially in some of the stuff in the earlier days when like nothing went for like more than just a few Matic most of the time. And a lot of these are really, really dope artists that make sick stuff on Screensaver World and Hin and beyond, right? And so being able to kind of pull it up and be like, hey, this is awesome, and like Rex said, give it a second look, kind of rehype it, pull it back to the front page of Vibes, and kind of really give it a chance to shine. And then Polyforms, what you're saying is, going back to that notion of there's three people on every piece. There's the artist, there's the collector, there's the curator. And having these conversations and various combinations and sort of relationships between that is super dope. Whether it's reaching out to an artist and saying like, hey, I love your stuff, I'm going to be pulling your work into Vibes, what do you think? Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe you're an artist and you start sharing your stuff and start trying to be involved in the community, so that your work can be curated and be part of that. And then, and even more so, after that update this evening is curators reaching out to other people that they like, they have great tastes, explaining Vibes in their own words to them, and then sort of delegating and handing them a slice of their curatorial abilities to say, hey, like, go do what I've been doing, like go pick cool pieces and pull them into Vibes, basically. So that relationship piece and that sort of peer-to-peer decentralized approach to interacting with artists, curators, and collectors in the community, that's super exciting.
So there's another question here from the Discord is, I just had a question about Sequencer. You call it a personal tokenized carrier wave. WTF is that? Did a bit of digging, but still not totally clear on what this is, but sounds very intriguing. I'm also personally, like, I still haven't quite fully wrapped my head around Sequencer and exactly what those do. So I don't know if you want to just speak to those.
Yeah. The I don't know. The main answer is, if it seems confusing, that's totally valid. Like, that's kind of where it's at right now. It is something that I think I call it like the node of an idea maze. There's all sorts of bullshit kind of things I say about it, including that carrier wave thing, which I will try to explain because I think it makes sense. But the idea is, one, collectibles are pretty hot. I think that's pretty interesting as far as people enjoying having digital things. That's pretty novel, in my opinion. Two, I really do think NFTs are going to eat the world. So right now we're seeing art, we're seeing collectibles, we're seeing the beginning of financial utility with things like Alchemist Crucible, Uniswap V3 liquidity position NFTs. We're seeing the sort of consumption of real life assets with protocols like Centrifuge. We're beginning to tokenizing these things. In my opinion, it's only a matter of time until almost everything that we interact with as a consumer or just a person in the world is going to have some tokenized component with it. What Sequencer is basically a foothold into this concept of exploring what the idea of having a sort of consumer-facing digital product. So in the same way that you would have an iPhone that is yours and it's physical and you can give it away or you could sell it, that's kind of what a Sequencer sort of is too. It's a platform, really. In the same way that when you have your phone, you can make it yours, you can put a case on it, you can change the wallpaper, you can really customize it. That's kind of what Sequencer is doing too, right? You can own a digital thing, now you can kind of make it yours a little bit. And even further than that, in the same way that if you have an iPhone, you can install your apps on that. You can extend it, you can customize it, you can add functionality. It has this notion of state, like it's persisting information or storing information. I believe that's something that Sequencer can be doing too. So it's sort of taking, just like the general concepts around, like consumer products and things like that, and thinking what it might look like to kind of put that into an NFT. So that's very, very abstract. There is a little bit more information in the docs that actually talks about what it does. But the way I see it functioning in the future is it will be sort of a key that unlocks all of the functionality and vibes for you. So if you want to go and you're a curator, your ability to be a curator is basically tied to your sequencer in the same way you might have a special app installed on your phone. Now, the reason why I think that could be interesting, again, this is all hypothesis, is that you can, since it's NFT, you could sell or trade or give that away. It's a way of basically allowing your kind of involvement or position within the protocol and community to be tokenized in such a way that you can transfer it to a different address, give it to a friend if you are kind of done with the project and moving on, or potentially sell it in the future and stuff like that. All of this is just like notes somewhere in a journal as far as where it can go. But there's a lot of kind of like options and opportunities I think we have to go on there. So that's sort of what it is. And if that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, I can happy to elaborate a little bit more. But it is just the very, 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 very early stages of how this is going. So to kind of think of where the inspiration is coming from, it's almost entirely coming from the idea of seeing the way that alchemists use their crucible, which is really just sort of like an indirection layer on top of a staking concept, and how people sort of responded to that, which I thought was interesting, as well as the Uniswap V3 LP NFTs on top of that too. So that's I'll pause there in case you have any more questions on that, but it's definitely nebulous right now, to say the least.
My approach to the sequences so far has been like, cool, I managed to figure out how to mint some, and I've got some now, and I'm just gonna kind of sit and wait for more stuff to happen with them before wondering too much about what they do.
Totally. And one thing that we've been exploring a little bit is the idea of shells, which is being able to swap out and customize them. That's probably one of the first use cases of just being able to, as an artist or a designer, come up with some pretty dope shells that you can create, and be creating a limited edition shell that you can install on your sequencers or sell to a few other people. Kind of creates this interesting kind of collectible scarcity component a little bit, like a limited run shell, only ever going to be on 5 sequencers. Is that interesting? Is that useful? Great questions. It's a lot of fun things to explore and think about. So again, if people are hyped about that or any of that sounds intriguing, hop into the Discord and kind of just think out loud here. So all of the code and the protocol and the way that all this is architected is kind of done in such a way that lots of parallel independent development can occur. And it's not stuff that has to have a whole lot of dependencies on one another. So there's a lot of freedom for people that are builders or kind of have experience in doing this stuff that they can kind of bring whatever they want to the project and kind of build on top of a lot of stuff there. And I'd be happy to direct to people to resources or source code stuff to get a better idea what that might look like.
Yeah, and there is a sequencer channel in the Discord, which has some sequencery stuff going on. That again, I just tend to ignore that because I don't know what's happening there half the time. So there was a question here, another one in the Discord. I noted that a piece that I curated and sold on Screensaver World was infused with vibes and was traded on the secondary market. Does that qualify me as an artist to receive some vibes in order to infuse my pieces or other pieces I possibly will collect, or is there another process to take part of it? Rex, I can see you're answering that in there.
Yeah, actually, so I infused this artist piece. I collected them really early, and that was I had some things going on this week, so I infused a few pieces from Kwame, Slim Suli, and James, and I had a chance to reach out to each one of those because I have familiarity with them, but I didn't have a chance to reach out to you, Jose Miguel. So I'm reaching out to you and one other artist basically this week to see if you guys want to infuse another piece and have it sent back to you, but you absolutely qualify for a vibes infusion or the ability to infuse a vibes piece now.
Nice. And what's awesome about that is Rex's answer. As a curator, she has full control and full say and full autonomy over what she does with her grant allocation of infusions. So that's been a crucial part of this project, is that I had a vision, I suppose, of kind of how vibes can work. I use it a certain way for some of my pieces, but the 10 people that have been selected as the initial curators can have any system, any process, any criteria, any approach that they want with the vibes that they've been given. So whatever she says goes is the answer. As one of the 10 curators, is totally her call how she does that, and it's awesome to see how everyone's kind of used them in slightly different ways. We have a channel where we coordinate a little bit, and I think we're all kind of learning from one another different ways to use this system, different ways to engage with the community and people we've collected, and it's been a blast. So it's been super fun.
Awesome. I see there's some furious typing happening in the Discord, so there might be some more questions coming in. But does anyone else want to come up as a speaker and ask any questions? Yeah, but if the questions are kind of, if we're sort of at the end of the questions, I'll give people a couple minutes to see if anyone has any more questions. But I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to add, Brandon.
Yeah, and anyone can dive in or jump in if they got a question. Feel free to interrupt me. But just kind of in case anyone missed it, or just as a TLDR on sort of like the what's next and future stuff, is that with this last update that's shipping this evening, is that's a big end to a pretty large kind of chunk of features and kind of completion. Other stuff, if you are a developer, if you're into React kind of stuff, there's lots of cool things to be done on the site. If you're into smart contract stuff, you want to dive into Sequencer, hop into that channel. But more than that, the most important thing and what most people will be able to contribute is all around the community side. So we have these interesting mechanisms that can serve us, I think, for quite a while. And what we do on top of those, kind of at, in the geeky way of saying that we say a lot of times, is the social layer. So just talking amongst one another, sharing ideas, trying stuff out. Like Rex said, she as a curator can curate any pieces that she wants, and something she can do is borrow an NFT from somebody to infuse and then let them go do that. So kind of playing with more and more of these social layer things in the community is definitely the stuff that I see kind of where we're going, and experimenting further with that.
James, I saw you came up to speak again. Do you have another question?
Hello again. Okay, I don't want you to actually answer now. In fact, it's a request. If there's potential that we can do something like this again, where you can explain the liquidity pool side of things as well, because I think I read either on the Sick Vibes website something about this is kind of like a way for us to experiment. And I think that's the word that I've stressed before, that I like hearing people being upfront saying that this is all an experiment, that we don't know what's going to happen. And so that's kind of it, because I think we just get lost in the tech, basically.
Yeah, it might be interesting. I mean, obviously, it's not necessarily directly related to vibes, and like the whole idea of LPing and DeFi is kind of a whole other thing. But it might, definitely might be worth discussing at some point. And I know, just to add to your question about doing more of these things, I think we did. I can't remember when it was that we did that initial community call, that the previous community call, Brandon. But yeah, we kind of did one of these before, which Brandon hosted just via the Discord, which was basically just like an update of kind of where things are at. So I think definitely going forward, it would be cool to do these kinds of things more regularly, and also just as a cool place to hang out with everybody who's involved in the ecosystem. Yeah.
Oh, for real. I mean, just look around, look at those avatars. I mean, there's like heroes in this room. But listen, I talk a lot, but I'd really encourage anybody that hasn't spoken, or maybe is a bit shy. Like, I understand that it's difficult, but just saying, be brave. It's like a good place to sort of just say hello. Even that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, totally. I know I've like hosted. I haven't actually done any Twitter Spaces before, but I've hosted a number of these kind of audio room things before, and often it's just me up on the stage, and no one wants to come up. But it's not. I promise, it's not that scary when you're up on the stage asking your question. But also feel free, if you don't want to, you can just type in the Discord. Yeah. Cool. Maybe we'll give like another minute or so to see if there's any more questions from anyone. But we can sort of start thinking about wrapping up soon.
I really like what you said, James, about, like encouraging people to whether it's here or just in the Discord and stuff, is that part of the importance of stressing the experimental nature of like, hey, we're doing it live and all this. One is, it is so important to have like real life experimentation when it comes to things like crypto. This is, brand new stuff that we've never even had before. And while it can be great to get a team together and come up with a super solid plan and totally planned out tokenomics and hella audited contracts and launch, by the time you do that, the opportunity could pass by. And more than that too, there's no way that you can get like 5 nerds in a room and come up with something that's gonna work necessarily. Like, you have to experiment, you have to try stuff, you have to see what breaks, you have to see what people like, you have to see what people don't like, and use that to kind of vector the project. And so part of that experimentation too is like the safe space mentality of ask questions. Nothing is too dumb to ask. Like, we're all learning here, including me, including the curators, including everyone that's been around for a while. Like, nobody has any idea what's going on. It's crypto. So have fun with it. Ask questions. We're all here to learn. We're all here to make dope art and share stuff with one another. So I'm glad, James, that you're stressing that too, because 100% can't say that enough, which is awesome.
James just asked another question in the Discord, which is this a cult? And the answer to that is definitely.
Nice. I used to always say I wanted to start a cult as a side project at some point in my life. So maybe that's phase 2 of Vibe. So I'll keep y'all posted and hand out any ceremonial robes or anything like that if it comes to that point. Y'all just stay posted on that.
Love it. I'm excited for my ceremonial robes.
Nice.
Cool. I guess if there's any sort of final stuff that you want to add, Brandon, before we wrap up?
No, not at all. Polyfarms, thank you so much for setting this up, man. This was great. You ran it like a champ, and it was awesome to hear from everyone who was able to kind of weigh in, get some thoughts, ask some questions, either here in the Discord. So nothing else to add. Y'all are awesome. Keep the conversation going and hit us up with questions, with ideas, anything you got. Happy to hear what people have to share. So appreciate it, y'all.
Yeah, a big thanks to you as well for all the work that you've been putting in on that, because I don't know if everyone knows this, but there's a couple people developing, but this is kind of, or at least the way I understand it, this is kind of all Brandon's brainchild, and you've been doing a ton of work on this and getting all this stuff ready. So thanks for all that awesome stuff that you're doing.
Totally. It's been fun seeing it in the wild and fun seeing how people react and respond to it. It's been a blast.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming, everybody. I'm sure we'll keep chatting in the Discord, and if there's any questions, just fire them in there. But yeah, thanks for coming and hanging out, and we'll hopefully catch you at another one real soon.
Thanks so much, y'all. Peace.
Later, everyone.
Cheers, everyone. I'm going to end the space. See you all around.